When I was a little boy, they used to tell us that the European thinks 100 years ahead of time. So this means that the Westerners, in quotes, always think very far away, before they do things. They see things before they happen. See, that is the image they put in the minds of the African children. Even in this day and age, in the present day discourses of highly educated people, I mean the well-read folks, you still find people speaking this way, thinking about the Europeans in those terms, that the Europeans think very far ahead of time. But is it really the case? Let us say that theory is truthful. Could have been that way in the past. So let's say that it is truthful. So we ought to be able to prove that this theory is falsifiable. So greetings, African people, the good people of Africa. We all see what is happening in Africa. We all see what is happening in Niger. We see how the violence has been progressively embracing Africa, engulfing Africa. I don't want to talk about this terror in the Sahel or terror in the Gulf of Guinea area. I want to speak about the issues in Mali and Burkina Faso and now Niger. And if we look at the trend, we could see that there is a possibility that this thing could continue going eastwards. So Chad could be the next. So why not Sudan and Ethiopia and Eritrea and so on and so forth? So is it really the case that the Europeans think 100 years ahead of time? That is a question that we have to pose. We have to ask this question when we see the things that are happening now and we see the way the Europeans respond to these issues. We have three great powers. Even though the French like to think of themselves as a great power, but as Frantz Fanon rightly stated, Africa is the only place wherein France maintains the illusion of being a superpower, so that disqualifies France as a great power or superpower, whichever way you want to describe it. So we are left with the United States of America, Russia, and of course China. So these are three great powers that are contesting for global dominance, that is dominion over the countries of the world. We have one of them, the United States, which has proven to be an antipathetic antagonist, going around antagonizing everyone. You see, antagonizing even the Europeans who are supposed to be allies of the US, antagonizing the Germans, antagonizing the French, contesting for dominance over the French or dominion over the French. Now, the US has been antagonizing Russia ever since the fall of the Soviet Empire, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, which was a big empire, a powerful empire. They're antagonizing the Chinese, On the one hand, they're saying that Taiwan is part of China, and on the other hand, they're telling the Chinese that you have to respect Taiwanese sovereignty, even though the world knows that Taiwan is part of China. The Americans and the Europeans are claiming that Russia is an enemy, yet they've designated China as the main adversary, the main enemy that has to be destroyed. So they're actually devalorizing Russia all the time, underestimating Russia. So they've waged this proxy war against the Russians. They themselves don't want to take part in the war. They don't want to take part in this war. They don't want to lose soldiers in the war against Russia. But isn't it the case that if Russia is not the main enemy, you would want to side with the Russians just because the Russians have a tested military? You want to have them by your side. You want to have Russia as an ally if you want to fight against what you consider as your staunchest enemy or your staunchest competitor, which is China. China, which incidentally doesn't have a tested army. We don't know of the Chinese getting involved in any wars, any recent wars. So we don't really know how good their army is. We know that they're a great power. They have the population. You see, they have the potential military might, which is still to be seen on the battlefield. So this pipeline that they call the Nord Stream was blown off. You know, people are saying that it was the United States that was behind it. Well, I don't speak about things I don't know anything about, so I'll just leave that. But that pipeline that used to supply Western Europe with gas, with natural gas, was blown off. So the first thing I want to question is this. If you think 100 years ahead of time, you would imagine that that pipeline was never to be attacked because this is a pipeline that fed Europe, that fed the industrial base of Germany, that fed the existence of the Europeans. You see? So the Europeans have questioned their dependence on Russian gas. The Americans are saying that the Russians are weaponizing energy, whereas the Americans themselves are in the business of weaponizing currency. They're weaponizing the dollar. So they're gaslighting the Russians. You're accusing them of doing what you actually do to others. You see, that's political intrigue, it's sophism and all that. Now, the person who thinks 100 years ahead of time would know that you don't bite the finger that feeds you. You see, you try to deal with it in a very careful manner, in a very meticulous way. And we are told in the political sciences that when it comes to the interest of business, when it comes to business interest, states will have to make a choice. So this discussion between statism and realism and liberal institutionalism. You see, saying that states, the realist argument is saying that states, are vying for power in an anarchic system. They want to survive, so they are rational actors. So a rational actor will not bite the finger that feeds it. Now, the liberal institutionalist argument is saying that, you see, states that are connected deeply through business ties will not go to war. But you can see that the realist argument has won today because Europe was tightly interconnected with Russia through these business dealings, the European industry, the natural gas, but that did not preclude the Russians from going to war against Ukraine, which is backed by the European Union and NATO. This whole thing about the EU expansion eastwards and NATO expansion eastwards is a broad topic. Oh, these are broad topics that I will not go into right now. I've talked about these things in some other talks that I've had. You see, the Europeans did not. It's like they're doing everything out of expediency. It's not calculated. It's not methodically orchestrated moves that you're making right now. You see, the pipeline, the blow of the pipeline in Europe, they call it Nord Stream, was blown off without the Europeans actually thinking of what to do about that, how to replace it. You see, so they came over to Nigeria and they said they were going to build a new pipeline that would supply gas from Nigeria to Europe. They call it the Trans-Sahara Pipeline. Starts from a place in Nigeria called the Warri area and goes all the way across Nigeria and transits across Niger and then continues northwards towards Algeria. There it splits to Morocco and Tunisia, and then it goes all the way to Europe. The the Trans-Sahara Pipeline. That's the way they call it. So this pipeline is supposed to, remove the dependency of Europeans from Russia to Nigeria. The reason is simple. Nigeria is considered a weaker power. You see, it's considered a country that is easy to be dealt with. And they're going to deal with Nigeria because Nigeria is a potential regional hegemon in Africa. You see, Nigeria's population and its wealth, its natural wealth, like the natural gas that they want to take from Nigeria, makes it a very, very potential target, you see, for comprehensive institutional emasculation by the imperialist devils. This is what the Nigerians don't think about. So the war that is raging across the Sahel region, you see, it is something that has to take the attention of the Nigerian political elites, in particular, and Africans in general. It has to jolt the public conscience of African people what is going on in that area, and even what is going on in what they've called the Gulf of Guinea. These are all Europeans' constructions. The Sahel, the Gulf of Guinea, which is down south towards the Atlantic coast, and up north, they have what they call the Maghreb. So a lot of people do not really think of this connection with this Trans-Sahara gas pipeline, which is going to pass from Nigeria right up to the Maghreb, from the Gulf of Guinea to the Maghreb area in Algeria. They think of these events, the associated events in Niger, to you see, to this fight for uranium, which is a very significant issue in its own right. We have all these military bases there. But uranium is not something that is difficult to transport as compared to natural gas. You need a pipeline. You need to build a pipeline, you see, to smoothen this process of transportation, delivery, if you want. Now, when you go around antagonizing everyone, what happens is that you're using militarized bureaucracy to do that. And militarized bureaucracy often gave rise to a craven tyranny. And when there's craven tyranny, there's going to be recalcitrance, and eventually there's going to be a revolt. See, militarized bureaucracy has no room for concessions. You see, it has no room for that. It is about imposition of values. You're imposing something on the target, you see, to get a target entrapped in order for you to use that target as you want it. That is what is happening. You see? So the bloodstained racketeers of Europe and the United States are scrambling so hard to get Niger entrapped. You see? To get Niger entrapped in total chaos, so that the Nigerian people will be trapped in the state of unending disorientation, in an unending state of disorientation, in a dismaying state of disorientation. That is what they're trying to do to Niger. They are not entrapping Nigeria. Nigeria is inviting itself to its own destruction. You see, Nigeria is inviting itself to its own destruction out of opportunism, out of blatant opportunism. Nigeria wants to take the place of Russia. This is a great power struggle that Nigeria is inviting itself into without knowing that Nigeria itself is a target for domestication. These are the things that Africans have to sit down and reflect. I'm not saying that people should accept those things as I'm saying them. I'm saying that you should not accept it uncritically. You should think about it by yourself. You see, you should use some deliberation and be able to analyze things. Why is there all this force about this? If they tell you that these people think 100 years ahead of time, it would mean that they think about everything. They think about every single possibility. They talk about the CIA, all this, You see, all these secret service agencies and things like that. They want to give you the impression that they are some type of God. They are playing some type of God with that rhodomontade. They're trying to tell you that they are everywhere, that they have their eyes. I call them the omnipresent outsider. They have eyes everywhere with their military bases, but they don't think 100 years ahead of time. They make you believe that, but that's not necessarily the case. You've antagonized Niger. You put a despot in power that does not serve the interests of the local Nigerian people. And when this man is ousted, you're struggling to reinstate. This leader is called Mohamed Bazoum, a leader whose election is highly contested, just like the election of Bola Tinubu in Nigeria, which is highly contested. Where is the legitimacy? We are told that legitimacy is about popular support. Now, when you see what you call the military junta in Niger, you would see very clearly that the people are in tandem. They're working in tandem, or they're working in one accord with the military. But the Westerners, the Europeans, and the Americans are antagonizing the Nigerian people. You see, they've antagonized Algeria for a long time ago, since the 60s. France used Algeria, you see, not just as a colony, because relations of identity were establishing in Algeria. See, the Algerians were assimilated, or the French wanted to assimilate Algeria into France. See, creating this type of some type of conspiratorial form of integration, which only generates immoral dependencies. So the Algerians were sort of assimilated into the French culture. Meanwhile, the countries or the French colonies in the south of the Sahara were used mostly as chattels, chattels with no dignity. Walter Rodney aptly speaks of the way assignments or things were assigned to various countries, beginning with his own country, Guyana. He said that Guyana was assigned the task of producing sugarcane. Senegal was assigned the task by the European devils of producing, groundnuts. You see, and Ghana was assigned the task of producing cocoa. This is how the Europeans conceptualize African states. You see, like properties, where they could make their plantations, to do these things. There was no vision for industrialization. There was no vision for industrial modernization of these countries. Now, if you want to object to this perceptions of you, if you wanted to escape from the prison in which you were put, going to be reprisals. That's exactly what we're seeing now. So you go around antagonizing everyone, antagonizing the Nigerians, you're antagonizing the Algerians. Recently, in 2011, on the 20th of October 2011, Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, was murdered, brutally murdered. You see, at the behest of the French. The French led the operation that went and killed Gaddafi in Libya. That was in 2011 on the 20th of October. So you've antagonized the Libyans. You see, the French antagonized the Algerians in the French-Algerian War in the 60s. What was it? You see, they fought a very brutal war, the Algerian War of Independence. Fanon was a French citizen of Martinique origin, so he came from the Caribbean, what they call the West Indies. So he was sent there to work, and he went to Algeria and he sympathized with the Algerians, and they decided to take up their cause as his own. So he's buried in Algeria, Frantz Fanon. So that bad blood between Algeria and France has never left, even though they're claiming that they want to pass this gas pipeline through Niger and Algeria, and then I think it would spread to Tunisia and Morocco. You see, they always think like that. But the problem is they do not think about it very well. If you say that you want to use these countries, you see, you have to be in good terms with the people. You have to be in good terms with the people. You put a belligerent despot in power that oppresses the masses, someone who, whose elections is highly contested, someone who might call a democratically elected criminal because he doesn't serve the interests of his people. He serves the interests of the outside oppressors. You put him in power, hoping that he's going to stay in power long enough for you to build this pipeline. The question is, how would that pipeline survive in such a hostile territory? You've antagonized the Russians long enough for the Russians to retaliate. You see, the pipeline that costed the Russians so much money was blown off, and you're trying to build a new pipeline. What do you think the Russians would do in the Sahel region? How do you think that the pipeline would go across Niger and all the way to Algeria? These are countries that are very hostile to European domination, European colonial domination, which has never ended. The oppressor never yields. See? The oppressor never yields. So Nigeria is embracing itself into a party that it was not supposed to be in. You see? This is exactly what is going on. So people speak of uranium. Yeah, Niger has uranium. By the way, they say that Niger is the seventh largest exporter of uranium. Is that really true? You see, the Europeans have this tendency of devalorizing what the Africans have. So the Africans don't really know how much they have. They know that every country in Africa has something that they want because Europe itself is a barren land. You see, it's not to say that there's nothing in Europe, but Europe is not rich in resources as Africa is. Africa is the blessed continent, which the Africans themselves do not know. They barely know who they are. They use all these European names. You see, if you don't call yourself, Paul Kagame, Robert Mugabe, Thomas Isidore Noel Sankara, you see, if you don't call yourself, you see, Helen Sirleaf, you see, you don't call yourself all these fascinating European names, which may sound exotic in your ears. And it sounds exotic because you have been conditioned to think of it in that way. If you tell these Africans that, okay, from today, you're not going to give any African child these so-called European names, they're going to fight with you because they have been conditioned to do that. You see, through behavioral domestication, which is the final phase in my treatise of human domestication. That's exactly what happens. Now, look at what is going on in Niger. The Nigerians are saying that we've had enough of this nonsense. We can't take it anymore. They're ready to fight. They're ready to die to preserve what is theirs. You see, France is importing uranium from Niger. And they're telling you that Niger is the seventh largest exporter of uranium, which is questionable. That is arguable because nobody knows how much uranium the Nigerians actually have under their soil. See, like I was saying before, the Europeans have this tendency of devalorizing Africa, devaluing the human in Africa. You see, diminishing this person in Africa. You see, to the extent that even what you have, you would tend to think that it has no value. Meanwhile, what you have is what they want. Donald Trump in the US spoke of Africa as the shithole countries. African countries call them shithole countries. Sarkozy went to Senegal and said that Africans are not recorded in history. Whatever the hell that means. You see, they have this tendency of always devalorizing Africa, devalorizing the African father in front of his son or his children. And when the father is devalued in front of his son or his children, the children will have no respect for the father. That's exactly what they do. Now, Niger, with all this uranium, has no electricity. Niger depends on Nigeria. 70% of Nigerian electricity comes from Nigeria. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a country with that much uranium. They say it says the seventh largest. It has the seventh largest deposit. How do you know that? How do you know it's the seventh? You know, that's something the Nigerians cannot actually tell because they don't know anything. The average Nigerian on the streets does not know how much uranium the country has because he doesn't benefit from it. He's still sleeping in darkness while all the streets in France have electricity. Walk in Europe the whole night, you see electricity everywhere. But the Nigerians are trapped in darkness. And you're telling them that their country is the seventh largest exporter of uranium to Europe. In 2021, I think Niger was the biggest uranium exporter to Europe. 2021, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, yeah. Now, Nigeria exports electricity to Niger. So Niger is dependent on Nigeria for electricity. You see, when the river Niger, I think it takes its roots somewhere around Niger and it flows down to Nigeria where you have the dam. So you see, these countries are interdependent with each other. You know, they're interdependent. So you're trying to entrap this Nigerian people to go and blow up or blow off this dam or blow up or block the water up there in Niger. You see, so that the Nigerians will not have the dam. So Nigerians, some of them are claiming that, oh, they have other sources of electricity. So even if something happened to the dam that supplies Niger with electricity, Nigeria is still going to have electricity. This is the argument that some of the supporters of the sanctions against Niger are saying. But the reality is that Nigeria itself is suffering from massive blackouts, despite all these alternative sources of electricity that they claim to have. So you see, they're trying to sell this war to themselves. They're trying to get themselves invited in a party wherein they are not invited. This is a party for the great powers. The Africans are going to be combatants in these great powers if they're not careful. But this is a party for the great powers. The Africans will not be able to liberate themselves from this European yoke without the help of another great power. They would say that, oh, you're leaving one colonial master, which is France, and running to another colonial master, which is Russia. No, it's not the case. The Russians have never colonized Africa. They have no history of dehumanizing African people, as the French have been doing ever since the Berlin Conference of 1884. That makes about 139 staggering years the French have been in Africa. They've had the colonies, and they've taken even countries that were never French colonies, countries like Cameroon, and a country like Togo. These were German colonies that were taken over from Germany when Germany was defeated in the First World War. This decision was made in the Treaty of Versailles, in 1919. So Niger is actually the source of the Nigerian hydroelectric power. Niger is the source of Nigerian hydroelectric power. They're claiming that, or the Nigerians are claiming that they have thermal energy or thermal power, and they have, the wind power. They're claiming all those things to justify, to try to rationalize the African humiliation in alignment with callousness. But what they don't know is that the more they do that, the more they're going to push so many Africans against Nigeria. When individuals decide to rationalize our African humiliation in alignment with callousness, we're going to have the African disorientation. African disorientation actually spreading even further. Morphing into violence. That's it. Because people want to survive. People are sick and tired of this domination. People are sick and tired of this, this devaluation of the values, of the moral valuations. Those are the things. Now, there is it's sorrowful absurdity when Africans do things like this. They're trying to take on a war, a proxy war, inviting yourself into a proxy war without actually knowing that you're actually jumping the fight. Nigeria itself is a tinderbox. Nigeria is a tinderbox waiting to ignite. You see, Nigeria is teetering on the brink of implosion. It's a badly fractured country. It's teetering on the brink of implosion, cultural implosion, sociological implosion, and what have you. So those are the things that people have to think about. The pipeline that the Nigerians want to start building is already going on from the Wari area. Wari area itself is a very unstable area. Then it goes up to the north, around the Sokoto area there, where you have the Boko Haram insurgents, lurking all over like wild animals. You see, now you create a new enemy, you're antagonizing a new set of people. These people around the Sokoto area there, the Nigerians and the Nigerians, these are brothers. You want them to fight against each other for what? You're trying to promote a fratricidal conflict, fratricidal bloodletting. That's what you're trying to do. No one is forcing the Nigerians to do this. The Nigerians are actually embracing this. You see, inviting a fratricidal war. Because when the omnipotent outside oppressor succeeds in doing this, he's not going to be there when you start killing each other. He's going to sit down and laugh while he drinks his champagne and say, oh, these African people, look at them. Look at them. Now, how do you respect people like that? So the issue is not just about uranium. They speak about uranium. They speak about gold. You see, those things are not really quintessential to survival. You see, natural gas is quintessential to the European survival. Yeah, that's it. Now the Nigerians are trying to embrace this ploy. You see, they're trying to embrace this ploy to get the Africans confined in a state of disorientation. That is what is going on. You see, the antipathetic antagonist is out to get this thing achieved. Now, the Nigerians are falling into this trap. They did not entrap themselves, but they are falling into a trap. It's like telling the Africans, well, someone comes and tells you that you're okay, you are prisoners, but they open the door. And the Nigerians are telling the Africans, see, look, I am the giant with no brain, or the brain of this giant is as small as the brain of a little midget. You see that? Now, this giant is telling the other Africans that, you see, it's better to stay in this prison. Because outside there, out of this prison, we're not sure what is going to happen. You're trying to tell the Africans that they are not strong enough. You see, they're not dignified enough to go out and look for other ways to survive, alternative ways to survive. That's exactly what the Nigerians are doing. It's about greed. It's about militant avarice. The Nigerians are buying into this militant avarice of the outside oppressor. You see? That's exactly what is going on. You're betraying your own brother because you want to survive. You see, in my country, we call it neck. See, a neck will kill Nigeria. A neck will kill Nigeria. You dig? It's like this story I read when I was a little boy. The man who had a fowl that laid the golden eggs. You dig? So there was a man that had a hen that was laying golden eggs every day. The hen was laying to this man one golden egg every day. So when the man came home, he met one golden egg from his hen. So he thought that, wow, maybe there are so many golden eggs in the belly of this hen. So you know what he did? One day he came up with this brilliant idea. He took a knife, picked up the hen, and cut open the hen. When the hen was still alive, he dissected the hen, and to his greatest dismay, there was no golden egg in the belly of this hen. So the hen died. He lost the hen. He lost everything. This was a man that became popular because of his hen, the hen that laid the golden egg to the man that had this fowl that laid the golden egg. You see? That is the role the Nigerians are trying to play in Africa. You're telling African people that they should stay where they are. They should be contented with what they are. You see, you're not telling them to be prepared. You're not preparing the African people. You're not preparing Nigerians for self-preservation. You see, for self-actualization. You see, for innovative ingenuity and eventually for industrial modernization. Nigeria will never industrialize because Nigeria has no self-determination. Nigeria has no self-development. Don't mind all the houses you see. The houses you see, the building, the roads, the bridges. That is not self-development. Self-development and self-determination is about autonomy. It's about state capacity. You see, it's about state autonomy, state capacity, the reconciliation of freedom and equality, state autonomy, being able to govern yourself without being disturbed by other powers from the outside. Nigeria doesn't have it. Nigeria is a badly divided country, a country which has taken it upon itself, you see, to be opportunistic to the extent that you would go and attack another brotherly nation that has done no harm to you. The Nigerians have never attacked the Nigerians. As a matter of fact, during the Biafra War, Niger was a very staunch ally to Nigeria, so Niger played a very important role in keeping Nigeria together. When the French sided with the Gabonese and the Ivorians to attack Nigeria, the Nigerians supported Nigeria or the Nigerian government under Gowon to fight against France and the Biafra insurgents or the Biafra people that wanted to separate from Nigeria. Nigeria itself, as I've said, is a tinderbox. You see, it's teetering on the brink of disaster. Well, the Bible says it in Proverbs 22, verse 8. When you sow injustice, whoever sows injustice shall reap what? Calamity. They like the Bible. You see, they have all these churches everywhere. Nigerian people, they don't have any time to think for themselves. They all have all these churches. You know, every Sunday they spend so much time in the churches instead of reading, instead of thinking. Because it's one thing to read, it's another thing to deliberate on what you're reading about and to look at the world around you. So you understand exactly what is going on and prevent yourself from being insensate. You know, when you reap injustice, you're going to sow what? Calamity. That's in the Bible. For those Nigerians who know what the Bible is, you know, that's what they're doing. The pipeline that they want to build, this thing they call the Trans-Sahara pipeline, has no future. It's not going to survive because the Russians are going to come to Africa by invitation, pretty much the same way as the United States came to Europe by invitation in the aftermath of the Second World War. Russians are going to come to Mali in an official capacity. They're going to do the same in Burkina Faso, and they're going to do the same in Niger, especially Niger, because Niger is highly strategic. It's a highly strategic country which has been devalued by the Europeans, particularly the French. You know, it's like when we were little boys, we wanted to buy school shoes, some nice sneakers. You go to the market, right? You go to the market and you see white sneakers that's so nice that catches your fancy out. You see, you want that sneaker, you want that shoes if you want it. But then you tell the salesman that, look, oh, that's not really my taste because I wanted the blue color. I don't want the white color. I want the blue color. I don't like the mark. But that's exactly what you want. So you try to play this little game with the salesman. And the salesman maybe had not sold anything ever since morning. So you want to sell something. So the salesman will tell you, okay, that white one that you want costs, that white one that you're asking about, it costs 10,000. All right. And you tell the salesman, I cannot pay 10,000 for that. That's not really what I want. So the salesman will ask you, okay, what do you want to pay for this? And you say, oh, I'll pay 4,000. And the salesman will tell you, okay, give me 5,000. And then you say, well, okay, this is not really what I want, but I can pay for it for 5,000. So the salesman might gain, he might not lose, but you would gain more. And the salesman would make very little profit from what he actually has, the good quality. And then you go and say, well, look at that. He was a stupid man. These are little games that they play. You don't have to look up to Europeans to teach you these things. These are games Africans play every day among themselves. They understand these things. But when it comes to the Europeans, they get inferiority complex, self-abasement. You see, they deal with the Europeans with a lot of trepidation, self-abasement. I mean, W.E.D. Du Bois said it to the Africans, but since the Africans don't learn, they will never read some of these things. So it's good to share with African people, even those who don't like to read. The boy said this: Europe has never produced and will never in our day produce a human being that cannot be counted in Africa and Asia. The boy said this, and that's quite true. So the people that are saying that the Europeans think 100 years ahead of time are not necessarily correct, because the Africans can do the same. The only reason why the Africans don't do that is because they've adopted this sense of subordination, this sense of subservience, this sense of self-abasement, because errors have been normalized in their judgment through the process of human domestication. That's exactly what the Africans are doing. Sometimes you find Africans who are as qualified as Europeans, but when the European comes around, they tend to think that the European has to be their master. Sometimes you walk in places and you're the most qualified African in the place amongst white folk. You're the most qualified. It happens, it's very common. It's happened to me several times. You're the most qualified. And not just the most qualified in terms of certificates, the most qualified in terms of expertise. You dig? But you don't believe that. You